Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Steve Clemons.
Greetings, everyone. We're going to do something that we think is going to be a little fun today, which is try to turn this into a TV show. You know, Stephen Colbert, if any of you watch, is no longer on CBS News. His last night was the other night. So this is a tryout to see whether I can succeed and fill his shoes. I don't think that will work out very well, but we are going to have a parade of fascinating and important global personalities join us this morning, and we're going to have some fun, and I hope you'll be involved in this discussion as well. I worry about this room a little bit. It's definitely the most comfortable room of the entire GLOBSEC forum. This is not a chance to sleep. I will come and wake you up, okay? But we've got a great start this morning, and I want to tell you what our goal is today as we kind of wander through the topics. In my view, you know, I'm Steve Clemons. I'm editor-at-large of the National Interest. I'm also host of a TV show I've been doing for about 7 years on Al Jazeera English called The Bottom Line. And each week I interview some notable American personality or global personality on what's been going on in the world. And in the world of foreign policy and foreign affairs, I've been involved with GLOBSEC for a long time. We're definitely an inflection point. We're at a point where the chapters in your history books are going to be punctuated by the time that we're in now, and they're going to be looked differently in the future. And I think those are some of the issues we're going to be talking about. And in my world, you know, when we think about GLOBSEC, the world globe or globalism, globalization, that was a time, you know, remember I'm older than most of you, but when President Clinton was president of the United States at that era, globalization kind of meant spreading more and more trust, spreading technology, moving people and ideas and institutions more frictionlessly across the world. Well, we're in a connected world today, very connected world, but it's not a high trust world. It's a high fear world that's very connected. And that's, I think, the era that we're in, and we need to navigate through all of that. So I'm going to ask my first guest today is Markus Ferber. He's one of the longest serving members of the European Parliament from Germany. He's chairman of the Hans Seidel Stiftung, member of the CSU. So please welcome Markus Ferber. Markus, come join me up here. You get a mic. I've done a lot of Seidel Foundation's events, so I've never been able to thank you for all of them. They're very good, so thank you so much. Markus, let me just start out. How are you today? Thanks for joining us in our little salon here.
I'm fine. I didn't stay too long yesterday evening.
You didn't stay at the palace?
Although I stayed there, of course, but I had only a few beers. As a Bavarian, I prefer beer. And left on time to be fit today.
Well, look, I mean, you're a fascinating personality because you're one of the longest-serving members of the European Parliament. My notes say you've been there since 1994. How many of you were born in 1994? No, okay, we've got one. This is a group, all of whom are younger so far, there'll be some other people come, than the tenure of your service. And just to start out, you know, 1994, look, I mean, you were there joining the European Parliament just after essentially the Soviet Union dissolved, came out, new opportunities were being created. And I'm interested in the transition that we're in today. And I want to get the tectonics of that as you see it. Do you think Europe, as you've known it and built it, is comfortable, is going to make it through the transition we have when we now see major big parties in that club of the European Union are now going to be spending a gargantuan amount of money on defense, on armaments? And we say defense, but it's actually security. But what are your thoughts?
I think every time has its challenges, and even in the early 90s we had the big two issues, preparing the introducing of the euro. Maybe people have forgotten that, but it
used to be controversial.
End of the decade we introduced it. And I remember I was in '98 for a long visit in the United States, and they told me you will fail because you will not solve the millennium problem. No one knows that in our days, but there was a millennium problem because we had only two digits for the years in the old computer system. So everyone said we will jump back to 1900 and not to 2000. And introducing the euro and to solve this problem, no one is able to achieve. We achieved it. And of course, we prepared enlargement. So from 1993, the discussions with our neighbor countries like Czech Republic started.
So you're saying it's been tough before?
It was tough as well. but fully different with a lot of optimism, a lot of possibilities. Not only me being young, but seeing that the world has changed, democracy has won, free market has won. And I wouldn't say all of that today, what we thought 30 years ago, and therefore the world has changed, has new challenges, but I'm really convinced, and I'm an optimist by birth, and I will not give that up, Europe will manage that.
How irritated are your colleagues in the European Parliament with the United States right now?
Yeah, I think the United States are still a great country, a wonderful country,
But that's
and
okay,
we
but
have
how-
a lot
but-
of relations. We speak about the White House.
Yeah.
And honestly, even in the Trump 1 times, a lot of things have been possible, and I was more than once in the United States, and it was always the phrase, everything which is below the radar is possible. Radar means if it has to come to the White House, it will become problematic. What we learn now in Trump 2 is that the radar is more precise, gets notice of more than in the first time, so less is possible, but still a lot of things are possible, and we still have a lot in common, not only on trade issues.
My theory of politics, essentially, but it also applies to foreign policy, is that human emotion matters a lot. The desire to be included, the desire to be respected and not humiliated, the fear of missing out, FOMO, jealousy, intrigue, duplicity. These are the kinds of things that animate politics. We have a room, I'm always found in conferences that are always, good people trying to do good things very earnestly and very linearly and deliberately. But the truth is that most achievements seem to me to be by accident or by jealousy or something of that sort. But in this moment, I'm sort of talking about national ego and Germany, because you're both a member of the European Parliament, but you represent Germany. Germany is going to you're going to be the largest spender on defense within the European Union. And to some degree, the EU and NATO was designed to keep standout nations from mattering so much. Are you worried about a Germany, your own country, that's super empowered on the military side?
No, honestly, because our defense forces have never been built after World War II to be a full equipped army. It always only delivers services to NATO. And therefore, we are not able to do everything. And it's for good reasons that we manage that like that. I did my service at the German Air Force a long time ago,
Right.
as you can imagine, in the time of Cold War, which was quite different. But even there, German Air Force was only delivering services in the NATO, and that is still today. Marine the same, and for the classical defense areas as well. So therefore, we will not threat anyone. We want to build a strong army
Go a
with
step
our
further.
partners.
When you have your taxpayers saying, hey, we're spending 5%, and we're going to spend an enormous amount on your national security and defense, more than most other countries in Europe by far, even combined. And you've got, you're basically removed your brake limit, your debt brake limit to do it under American pressure to some degree to do that. I think the question is not, is Germany going to become uncontrollable? I think the question is, what does it do to the German psyche? When you sort of see that big shift, does it require something else?
Number one, even in the Cold War, we spent most money in Europe for defense. And of course, we took this peace dividend mostly in comparison to all the other neighbors, especially France and the United Kingdom, as we don't have nuclear weapons, and that gives a possibility to save even more. And now we have to reinvest again, as a lot of things got some age where you cannot use them anymore. But what we always did, spending in research and development. So I think we are very good as well. But my concern was, especially with the first 100 billions Germany has brought forward after Russia started the war against Ukraine, that 75% out of that was spent in the US. So it was great for US, but German taxpayers complained, why do we have the companies in Europe, why don't we have the companies in Germany to deliver these products which are demanded? And I think that is what we are improving now on European level to develop industry as well.
Take your German hat off for a moment. Let's get you back to being just a European, a generic European. I think one of the other really interesting questions out there is you have 500 million people in Europe. all kind of fragmented but coming together in the European Union. Most of these nations are committing to a very, very big upsurge in the amount of defense and security. And you have President Macron, who's been advocating strategic autonomy or more purposefulness in what Europe decides to do with all of this money and these resources. And I want to emphasize, and a lot of people kind of kick Europe around saying, wow, you haven't been doing your fair share. I mean, the United States has been guilting and shaming Europe to do this, but let's have no doubt, the United States had the Europe it wanted before. It did not want a strong and capable and robust Europe. It wanted a compliant Europe that did exactly what the United States wanted it to do. Now that switch has been turned, where Europe's going to have a lot more capacity and it's going to have a lot more ability to tell America, no, we're not going to go that direction. I'm interested in what it will do psychologically when Europe actually does have more autonomy. And is that something that excites you?
I think it's not a question of excitement, it's a question of political demands and needs. Sorry, as you mentioned, France, when I started my career, France was joining NATO only on the political part, not on the military part. And I remember the NATO summit in Strasbourg under Sarkozy, when France joined the military arm of NATO again, not because they've been convinced to be a partner of US is very important, but having national budget restrictions. Honestly, that is one of the reasons why France joined in, and we have the same problem now as well. Of course, we have the promise of 5% spending for defense, 3.5 directly for military, 1.5 for infrastructure, but that we are able to deliver services wherever they are demanded. But we have to do that as European, because it was all times clear, even in the times I did my service in the 80s, that Europe has to be able for a while to defend itself. And what we see in the war of Ukraine, that conventional war, which we thought will never happen again, which is more similar to World War I than to World War II, what's happening in the Ukraine with new technologies, of course, shows that we have to be able to defend ourselves on such a threat. And therefore, I think it makes sense that Europe becomes stronger. But Europe, not each nation, Europe.
What's the temperature in the European Union when it comes to the next steps on Ukraine? I'm going to have Markus Tsahkna, the foreign minister of Estonia, up on the stage shortly. And when you listen to him, his decibel level of concern remains very, very high. And his criticism of colleagues in Europe is as you move westward, that decibel level of concern declines. Do you share that view?
Absolutely. If you speak with Portuguese foreign minister Paulo Rangel, which is a good friend of mine, he says, come on, Russia will never attack us. But I said, but if it attacks Europe, it attacks you as well. So what we have to learn, that distance is a value, yes, but it does not create a better environment. If someone on the other side of European Union is attacked, Europe is then attacked, and that will hurt Portugal as well.
Let me ask you, last week, I don't know if any of you were at the Lennart Meri conference in Tallinn, Estonia. I was there, and there with the opening session, there was a collision. Fascinating collision. Edi Rama, the Prime Minister of Albania, who I interviewed here at GLOBSEC a few years ago on this very stage, was his artistic self and a provocateur. But he basically said that to some degree what Europe had not yet gotten out of it, that Europe was now defining itself and defining its agenda around a percentage point of GDP committed to increasing in security that you heard about very little less. And he said what's not happening is a consideration of what does that do to a country's legitimacy? What does it do to the social contract? What does it do to what being European means? And he was asking these soft issues that surround national or continental identity. And I thought it was a very, very legitimate pathway to ask, but boy, did that room get tense. They did not like that set of questions. They didn't like the questions about defense spending being questioned at all in terms of this moment. But do you think Edi Rama has a point?
Absolutely, and we have to manage that, and I think that is a European responsibility, not only distributing money or organizing standards. Standardization is key. As you know, we have this threat in Europe that everyone has its own equipment that does not fit to each other. But then you have to organize a fair share, that everyone gets something for its money, value for money. Otherwise, we will have these problems that national budgets are spending for products which does not create jobs, social security in the state itself. And we have the good experience with Galileo, the satellites, where I was managing that as well a long time ago. Europe financed it, but it organized that every member state gets a fair share out of this system, that they have revenues as well. And I think that is what we have to deliver on European level, and that is the added value European Commission could create. And that is what I discuss with Kubilius regularly, that we set some standards and then we organize that each member state get its fair share back.
Now, you're with the CSU. You still are. Hans Seidel Foundation, one of the major foundations of political. You know, I remember when the AfD was born, it was a tiny little outfit. People said it would go nowhere. It's polling larger than I think any other party right now in Germany. When we kind of look at what we're talking about rearming the states, do you have any concern about what's happening to the domestic political context inside, you know, the rise of populism, if you will, in some of our largest, you know, democratic states?
Of course, that is a major concern, not only in Germany, it's all over Europe, and I will not go in all the details, starting here in Czech Republic, Slovakia, what happened in Hungary, thanks God, a few weeks ago, what's happening in...
So it's a mixed bag. Like
Next year we have elections in France, in Poland, in Italy, maybe in Bulgaria again, no one knows, because they try to elect every year twice. Sorry for being cynical. And
I love cynicism. I thrive in cynicism.
But of course there is a threat, and that is, I think, the main message we have to learn. Even the old Romans had this slogan, divide et impera, separate and then you can conquer them.
Right.
And that is what we see from outside, not from the White House, more from the Kremlin, and from Xi Jinping as well in economical terms. And I think the only lesson we have to learn is whatever happens in member states, we have to stick together, otherwise we are victims of the others and we are not an organization which can deliver any benefits to the people if we are separated. And to work together is the only chance to survive in this new environment.
But it's still going to happen. Do you anticipate in future German elections that the composite, the national character is going to have to just... You have to make different deals.
Yeah, but now we have to go to each member state and its individual problems. And if you look to Germany, the main problem for us is economics. Yeah, the outlook from the Commission this week is 0.5% growth rate in this year, which is almost nothing. Czech Republic, for example, is 1.8%. So other member states do better, although they have the same problems, the world problems, the global problems. That means Germany has to deliver some adjustments economically in the welfare system, in the social system, which has to be adjusted. And the main accusation from AfD is that the politic is not able to deliver, so we have to deliver. And I think then we are able to circumvent them.
Let me ask you another thing. It's sort of an existential moment. I see the room is getting bigger and bigger. It's great to see you, Milan Solar, other people in the show. If you have a question, kind of wink at me or throw something at me, and we'll get you involved here. But I'm really interested in the question of China. China is another thing that talked about. What I find fascinating from an American viewpoint is how much U.S.-China competition is now pitched as an existential threat to America's place in the world, to the way we're globally engaged. We just saw in the Trump-Xi visit the discussion of Thucydides, brought up by Xi Jinping, in fact. Be careful, America, you may be in trouble. But what I find interesting is, in our rhetoric, in our I say our as an American, China was never supposed to succeed. Command economies run top down with a central committee of this sort. Communism was supposed to suck. It was supposed to fail. And we have organized a lot of our concern around China around the Central Communist Party of China. And so I ask this to say, whether that is now an ideological battle again, because it's raising the question. I love the way you just framed talking about what democracies are delivering or not. But are we an existential challenge right now for democracies being perceived on whether they deliver for their people as well as illiberal market economies?
Oh, don't ask it the German, as our history is not the best one in that sense.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm so fighting that democracy has a chance. And maybe it's our model. Maybe
So what do we have to do better?
Yeah, democracy maybe is not the fastest to deliver, but it's the most stable to deliver. And it gives the most freedom, not only to the people, but as well to the entrepreneurs. And I think both is very needed. On the other hand, if you look to China, how they deal with the country itself, not taking care on the environment, not taking care on people. If infrastructure is demanded, they build it, whatever happens there, whatever people living there. I do not think that that is the appropriate way for the Western world. If Chinese people can live with that, sorry, it's not my issue. But for us, it will be never the chance, neither in the United States nor in the European Union, in the member states. So therefore, we have to find our way. But what we have to learn is how to speed up. Especially on European level, processes takes years to decide, and we have to speed up. That is one of my main concerning issues, because in comparison to China, they are able to deliver. Even in the United States, where a lot of administrative powers have been delegated to institutions, to agencies, where sometimes you could put a question whether that is still democratic or not, if the Senate, the Hill, empowers the agencies. But on the other hand, our approach, where we have proposals from the Commission, discussions in the Parliament for years, discussions in the member states for years, that is something we have to speed up, and that is what people expect, that we are able to deliver solutions for problems which are visible, everyone knows them, we can describe them, but then we have to solve them.
You know, I don't know if you go to the World Economic Forum, fewer and fewer people admit to it. They still go, you know, in Davos, but I do go. I'm one of those types. And this year, the Trump administration took a huge number of people. I knew a couple of people from the Trump administration who were there, and they said, Steve, if you don't take us out and show us a good time in Davos, we're going to stand on the promenade and say, we want Greenland. That was going to be the whole thing. That was either I had to keep them from doing that, I had to take them out. They saw it as a joke. I can't imagine anything that created a cold breeze, a tough moment in transatlantic relations more than that recently, in the threat to NATO members, allies of the United States, over their stance on Greenland, that they might in fact be tariffed by the United States in that mix. There is still a rumbling fury out there. It's not talked about. Some people think about it as a joke, like I just defined it. But a lot of Europeans, for that moment, it was a dark day that said, we can no longer trust America. Is that feeling still out there?
Of course. And as President Trump is repeating and repeating that he wants to have Greenland, it does not fit to our values, which means, firstly, the people of Greenland decide where they want to be. And I have the feeling, I met the Prime Minister, that they want to stick to Denmark, although they did not feel very comfortable in the past. But I think it's better now. And the other thing is, of course, what we can discuss, and no one has a problem with that. We understand that the Arctic has a strategic issue, and that has to be responded. And that is a NATO issue for us and not a US issue. And if we can solve that on NATO level, why not? It was the US who closed a lot of stations in Greenland in the past. They can be reopened. There are a lot of possibilities Denmark was offering.
Right.
So it's not the question who is the owner, it's the question how it is integrated in a defense concept on NATO level. And that is our approach. And there we are granting and willing to give a lot of things and even support it, finance it, whatever is demanded, but not speaking about the ownership.
So let me ask you a last question. We have our friends from Ghana who've just arrived, so we're going to give them a moment to get settled and then jump in this. The other big topic, the wave right now, the tsunami coming at all of us, is AI. And AI is debated and discussed, I'm sure, in the European Union. I have no idea whether you have views on AI, whether you're on any of the relevant committees. But what I will tell you is that, again, that many of the large LLMs, the large language models that are out there that are being trained and whatnot, are ravenous for information. They're ravenous for more and more and more. And the disputes that are generating inside the United States by journalists like me, whose material is ending up in there without recognition or payment. But you also have privacy in Europe, et cetera. But this is again pitched that if these LLMs don't have the room to run and to build what they are, then they will lose to China. And so they've raised a lot of questions, particularly about European regulation. That European regulation is almost designed so that the United States must ultimately fail in this competition because China doesn't have these same roadblocks. What are your views, both about how do you get the governance dimensions right in the AI world, but are we, because of those governance rights, going to pay a price that ultimately we won't set the standard in AI and won't achieve what China will because it doesn't have those democratic constraints?
Yeah, I'm very happy that you raised this question at the end because there's this wonderful old phrase, US innovates, Europe regulates, and China imitates. And we did our job. Yeah, we regulated AI. And even before some chapters come into force, we have now done a re-discussion on AI. Yeah, we solved it a few weeks ago. So that means the way Europe went through this issue, not seeing the chances, but seeing only the problems and trying to regulate all the stuff around that, I think is not the appropriate approach. There are some threats, yes, of course, but there are a lot of possibilities as well. And I think who wants to win the economical, I will not call it war, but developments in the 21st century will have to use AI tools. And what Europe has is really huge, wonderful, great data. We have the data from all of our machineries in the production. We have a lot of possibilities over there, and we should use them by ourselves and not transfer them, especially not to China. And therefore, I'm with you. What we did, and I voted against the AI Act, to be very clear. It was a noted vote. Everyone can prove that, because I said we have to see the chances and not only the problems. We discussed only problems in the European Parliament, never about the chances, the possibilities coming out of AI. And I think we have to concentrate the discussion in that
I love how
track.
you frame that at the end, that we always think about the problems. I mean, I always think about the problems because I'm a dark and cynical person as well. But just as you leave, what is the most fun, positive thing you can think about in the European Parliament and what you specifically are excited about? Give our room one sense of anything optimistic that we can grab that you're working on in the European Parliament.
As I directly came here to Prague from Strasbourg, as we had a plenary session, and we had one vote. Don't ask me about what, but it was a vote cross-party, cross-member states, where only one voted against and two abstained, and all the others been in favor. So there is still a momentum to do things together, and I think that is the optimism we have to take from Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, Markus Ferber, member of the European Parliament, thank you so much. Chairman of the Hans Seidel Foundation.
Thank you, Stevie.
Thank you so much. Great to have you. Hope you come back to the show someday. All right, great. We need to move on now to the Foreign Minister of Ghana, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa. Let me invite the Foreign Minister to join us up here. Let's give a big round of applause. Mr. Foreign Minister, how are you? Do you hang out in Prague very often? Here's a microphone for you. You come to Prague a lot?
Yeah.
You probably come out to...
Not too often, but it's one of my favorite cities. Really beautiful city, and it's great to be here.
Where should we all go in Ghana?
Accra.
Okay.
Yes, particularly next month. We have a big conference where we are going to discuss the Next Steps Conference.
Are you going to? It's called the Next Steps Conference.
Next
What is
Steps
it going to
Conference.
achieve?
So it's going to, after the historic UN resolution, resolution AR/RAS/80/250,
Yes. Which we're going to discuss.
/250, which overwhelmingly adopted our resolution that the transatlantic slave trade was the gravest crime against humanity. The Next Steps Conference, next month from the 17th to the 19th of June, will begin to concretize the processes leading to justice. So the return of artifacts, apologies, the healing process, the issues to do with compensation, dealing with the consequences of that whole dark era, which continues to linger on onto this day, how we dismantle the pillars of discrimination. So those are the objectives.
What I want you to do is to tell our audience, both in this room and those watching here online, the dimensions of this reparatory justice effort that you have been there. And I want to tell our audience that the foreign minister has been on this campaign when he was a member of parliament, that you moved from the parliament when you were here. This is a complete life obsession for you, and you've taken this to the United Nations, where you've achieved an outstanding result on this. But I want our room to understand what that resolution says.
So the resolution deals with a major part of our history, which we have not reckoned with, which we have not come to terms with, which many have not taken responsibility for, particularly our friends in Europe and the United States. And I'm referring to the transatlantic enslavement of Africans. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly removed from the continent, torn from their families, from their homes, against their will. Laws were passed to justify that. Africans were, at the time, considered subhuman, as movable property. They didn't have rights. And more than 300 years, it's been the most enduring crime against humanity. And never did we have a situation where the global community said, look, let's reckon with this historical injustice. Let us call it what it is, and let us begin to take steps to remedy the enduring consequences. So on the 25th of March, history was made. The resolution led by President John Dramani Mahama of Ghana, who is the African Union champion on reparatory justice, was tabled. And 123 countries voted in favor. Only 3 countries, the US, Argentina, and Israel, voted against. And we had just about 32 abstentions, largely from Europe. The overwhelming numbers, almost a 2/3 majority, reveals a historical truth that the majority of the global community accept that this injustice should not have happened, and that we must, most importantly, take steps to guarantee a non-recurrence, so that never again in the history of humanity should we see this happen. And the resolution is a very practical one, where it is asking for apologies, it is asking for the return of artifacts. There are millions of artifacts that remain outside Africa, that were looted. And here,
in museums and private
in
collections
museums
all over
and
the
private
world,
collections
right? Yeah.
all over the world, which have to be returned, what we call restitution. And then there is the matter of financial reparations, which we have not really confronted. And you see, the international community knows how to do this. It's been done before, after the Holocaust. All the issues that people of African descent are raising, it's not new to the international community, if we will be honest. After the Holocaust, there has been reparatory justice. Financial reparations have been paid by the
That's
Germans.
a very important note in the United States. Former Deputy Secretary of State Stuart Eisenstadt led that campaign.
Absolutely.
J.D. Bendenagel,
Yes.
very famous, had spoken at
Absolutely.
GLOBSEC
Yes.
before, led that campaign. It also happened domestically inside the United States with reparations to Japanese Americans who were
Yes.
interned during World War II.
That's true.
I just want to put that on the table. My friend
Yes.
Ta-Nehisi Coates,
Yes.
who's been one of the leading proponents inside the United States for reparations for descendants of black slaves inside America there has not gone anywhere. But I just want to make sure that
Yes.
you're absolutely right, and there are these other elements.
Thank you for that. And what is even beautiful about this history is that up until very recently, only last month, President Donald Trump signed a new executive order extending the issue of restitution, that all artifacts in the possession of Nazis, of Germans, whoever,
Sure.
should be returned, no matter how long they've had it, no matter how much they paid for it. So when some denialists and pessimists say that, Africans are asking for too much, it is most unfair, because we really, as an international community, know how to reckon. We have done that before. We continue to do that. So reparatory justice should not begin to look like it is only fair depending on who is asking for it, depending on the color of the skin of who is making those demands. And that is why Ghana wants to commend France. President Emmanuel Macron did something this week which is so remarkable, and I don't think the international community has given him enough credit. 2 days ago, on the 21st, he commemorated the 25th anniversary of France's declaration of slavery as a crime against humanity. In his speech, he did 4 things very remarkable. 1, he said that France must reckon with its past and should no longer be hypocritical about what happened. 2, he said that Code Noir, which represents statutes, laws that King Charles XIV passed, which continue to be on the French statute books, should all be repealed, and that in the next few days, he is sponsoring.
So huge achievement.
Very huge achievement. Number 3, he endorsed Ghana's reparatory justice effort and said that he will personally address the Next Step Summit. And then number 4, he announced that he will work with Ghana to establish a scientific commission in Ghana to really unearth all of what happened, bring out the facts, help us locate where all these artifacts are, so that we can have a good faith dialogue about reparatory justice. And I think that that is the attitude that we must commend. And President Emmanuel Macron must receive high praise
Let
for
me ask you, and
his
then
sincerity.
I've been telling your team is telling me through this, you're going to have a hard stop at something in a few minutes, but this is such a fascinating subject. I've always had the view that history is fluid. It's not just facts. History is fluid, and it's often negotiated by the powerful. Is this a sign that Africa's power equation is changing dramatically in this moment? That for a lot of reasons, whether it's self-realization in Africa about the ongoing and lingering dimensions of colonialism, or the fact that you're sitting on tons of assets that the world needs, or Africa is getting its act together as a continent, but also the nations within Africa are emerging and going to become the future tigers of the global economy and have this, that you are now much, much more powerful, and so you can change, you can rewrite a history that was wrong before. Is that part of what's going on?
To be honest, it is part of what is going on. I mean, to see mighty powers support this resolution across all regions of the world. There were Europeans who voted for it, Asians who voted for it, all member states of the Caribbean countries supporting the 54 UN member states from Africa. This is totally outstanding, and it shows that Africa's time has come. The youngest population, young, enlightened, very dynamic young people who will not accept the status quo, who will not be pushovers, who will demand that their voices are heard. A continent with very rich resources, its people first, its young population, the median age of about 20, and so it's the continent of the future. I mean, by 2050, estimates say that 1 out of every 5 people in the world will be African. That is a huge lever that the African people are using. And we are no longer a group of people who can just be ignored and silenced. A lot of the critical minerals, a lot of the oil and gas that the world is looking for is in abundance in Africa. And now we are adding value, we are negotiating on our own terms. And so all of this,
my final question on that is, are you willing
us
to use those assets and that power around critical materials, which China needs, United States needs? I mean, there's a great game around Africa. Are you willing to demand more productive forward steps by France, by the United States, by Germany, by other nations, if they're going to participate in your critical materials richness? And I also throw China in there, which is often neglected, but China may be engaged in its own neo-colonial behaviors around the world. But I'm just interested, are you willing to put those resources on the line and demand that these countries have to change?
Definitely. We have started. I mean, we are the second world's biggest producer of cocoa. Our president has said that by 2030, we will not be exporting raw beans. They will all be processed. And you must, if you want to continue to invest in the chocolate industry, you must also invest in Africa and create jobs for young people on the continent. We are the #1 producer of gold now. Last year, we sold about $11.8 billion of gold. Wow. We are saying that we will no longer sell the raw ore. We are going to add value. So we are using all of that. You heard recently of how the negotiations went on the U.S. health agreement. Ghana rejected it, saying that it didn't meet our terms because it violated, privacy laws in our country. So increasingly, we are demonstrating that we want to be treated with respect. We want to have good faith negotiations, which are fair. We don't want any arm twisting. We don't want to be exploited, because it's all part of the lingering and enduring consequences of slavery, where there is a certain notion that these are people who, are second-class citizens of the world. We can take advantage of their resources. We can exploit their resources, parachute in, loot whatever we want and get away. That has changed. Now we have a new crop of leaders who are insisting that Africans must be heard, that African resources belong to Africans, that African resources must benefit everybody. It has to be a win-win arrangement. Mm-hmm. You don't just come and loot and go, whether you are China or Russia or the US, let us have a very decent, honest, profitable engagement for all sides. It must be a two-way affair, not a one-sided economic arrangement. And so you can be assured that the new breed of African leaders are determined. Because, you see, the young Africans who are in the majority, overwhelming majority, will no longer tolerate political leadership that is corrupt, that is lopsided, and becomes a betrayal of the masses, just because of their individual personal interests. They will not be spared. And I think that those democratic pressures, is helping.
I hope you're enjoying GLOBSEC.
I am. I'm really
one of the things I'm interested,
they
have a session here. I haven't been able to go to any of them, called Behind Closed Doors. I'm really interested. You're a powerful foreign minister. You've got a powerful agenda, and I can feel the passion of it. I think one of the really interesting things are people to people. When you're sitting with a bunch of other foreign ministers, or you're talking to people here, or your team and delegation are talking to people, do they get it? What's the gap you have to fill to help other people understand the human dimensions of this?
When I talk to colleagues, I think European leaders have become more receptive. For example, I can reveal to you on this platform that the Germans have only a few days ago approached us, that they've identified artifacts they are willing to return in the next few days. That is really impressive. The Dutch have also presented to us a whole compendium, their own collection of what they believe represent all of what they looted. And they are discussing with us a timetable to return all those artifacts. So, contrary to what mainstream media, they're trying to position this as a divisive agenda, we versus them, and that we will not succeed. I mean, we see momentum. We see a certain honest approach by European foreign ministers, prime ministers, a lot of whom have confirmed that they will be in Accra next month. So I really must say that I am impressed. I mean, beyond my wildest imagination. I was expecting, a very rancorous, more difficult, a lot of, depressing, hard work. But I think that this is an idea whose time has come, and particularly for the younger generation, they want to see justice across the board. What we continue to do for the Jews, and we must condemn the Holocaust. We should do same for Africans and people of African descent. So I'm really impressed with the reception we are receiving here.
I'm so grateful you brought this issue to this platform and you shared with us what you're doing. It's really impressive, and I wish you luck with your conference. I wish I could go to your conference, Next Steps, next month. I'll talk to GLOBSEC about it. But
please
ladies
do.
and gentlemen, Foreign Minister Samuel Ablakwa of Ghana, thank you so much for joining us. Great thanking you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. Okay. How are we doing? Everybody enjoying this? The room is getting fuller. Okay, now we're going to have fun in a different direction. Let me invite to the room the former director of the National Security Agency, former commander of U.S. Cyber Command, Admiral Mike Rogers. Mike, welcome. Welcome to the Clemons Show. We're trying to say, I'm trying to...
Isn't life the Clemons Show?
Do you dance? Do you sing?
Life the Clemons
Trying to make
Show?
this like Colbert a little bit, Hi there, who are you?
Thank you. She's very intent.
Yeah,
she's
very,
focused on achieving her objective.
All signal, no noise. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. How was your GLOBSEC experience?
Oh, very good. It's the first time I've been here. I've been invited for years, but for a variety of reasons never made it. I'm very glad that I was here this year.
What's the biggest thing that irritated you?
I wouldn't say irritated. Look, we have to acknowledge that the dynamic between the United States and Europe is not in a great place right now. It doesn't mean that we're not doing good things together, but clearly we're at a level of agitation and frustration with each other that we just haven't been in a long, long time. And
now, you're an American. Are you faulting the Europeans? Or
no,
do you think America's
I'm
just
not
being
here to blame. My focus is I'm less interested in who's to blame, and I'm much more interested in, hey, how do we deal with this, and how do we sustain the long-term dynamic that has created, I would argue, enhanced security and an enhanced economic dynamic for both Europe and the other side of the Atlantic, my nation as well as Canada. My view is I got the political differences. We'll work our way through that. Could we not lose focus on the long term here? Let's not define ourselves by a particular period of time. This is a relationship. Take the alliance, 80 years. I mean, that is something not to walk away from or not treat casually. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that could be improved on both sides. I'm the first to acknowledge that. But I don't want to lose, for me, I don't want to lose focus on the fundamental value.
Do you know, I was just, chatting a minute ago with one of the longest serving members of the European Parliament on what damage the Greenland commentary from the President of the United States made. And I was sharing that at the World Economic Forum in Davos, a couple of his delegation are saying, hey, Steve, take us out to the bars tonight where we're going to stand on the promenade and say, we want Greenland. And they were joking about it. But for the Europeans, just a few days before Davos was when Trump threatened those NATO member nations that were supporting Denmark or any nation that supported Greenland in that effort. Now that dissipated. People said, oh, it was negotiated. I saw the bond markets go crazy, right? So the bond markets disciplined that moment more than other things. But I'm just interested as you sort of look at how you guide that relationship in a responsible way. What do we have to do with leaders on all sides?
Well, look, it goes to when one, forget about the particulars of this case and just step back. When one NATO member is threatening to invade the sovereign territory of another NATO member, if that actually occurred, you'd be thinking, now we would be evoking potentially Article 5 for an internal alliance dynamic. And I always remember, look, the only time the alliance in 80 years has invoked Article 5 was in defense of the United States.
Yeah.
I always urge Americans, don't lose sight of that, guys. This is a structure that has worked for both of us. Now, that's not to imply that it's perfect. But I don't, like I said, I don't want to lose sight of the fundamental value, the fundamental objective. Even as I acknowledge there's things that we can work on. But the challenge at the moment is, particularly in my own nation, in trying to express, it seems, I'm not part of the administration, but in trying to express frustration with some aspects of the alliance, we've become pretty aggressive in the way we're expressing that displeasure. I just don't want us to lose focus. And you got to acknowledge Greenland. It's the one thing I hear. I was in Davos. I do the Munich Security Conference like you, do the World Economic Forum here. And Greenland is the one thing that you constantly will hear as to, wait a second, how could you guys do something like this?
Right.
How could you even intimate that you would even consider this, let alone publicly threaten us with this? It really has significantly impacted the psyche here in terms of, are we dealing with a fundamentally different America if this is the way the future is going to be?
So I've had the pleasure of knowing a lot of former directors of the National Security Agency. You're my favorite by far. But I've known a lot.
Watch it. This is where the question comes in next.
Odom and others.
This is the...
And there's always, for those of you that are into kind of spy masters, cryptography, how we basically deal with encryption, looking at how you manage the world's most important secrets. The NSA and Cyber Command, they're the matrix, right? You're in the middle of the matrix, and there's always a journalist or a I don't know what to call Edward Snowden, someone who basically brings a picture. It used to be James Bamford, who wrote the book Puzzle Palace, and was threatened with being thrown in jail, who gave us the biggest picture at that time in that era of how the NSA worked. Edward Snowden gave us a different picture of how all that worked. I'd love to hear from you. Take us inside the matrix. Have us understand for a moment what's going on in that cyber world where only a very few people like yourself have seen what China's doing, what Iran is doing, what Russia's doing, what the United States is doing. And I'm also interested in small players. Belarus, I go to Davos, and Cisco has this great board showing where malware and horrible things are being launched from around the world. It can kind of track it in real time around the world. There are a lot of small players in this space, North Korea. And so I'm interested in you giving people something we all get a sterile, we talk about cyber stuff in a very sterile way. Take us inside and understand the tension points.
So look, NSA is a global organization. That's a big world out there. So the first thing you're trying to do broadly as a director is you're trying to make sure that your priorities are appropriately focused and aligned. You're trying to figure out what's the most important thing, how should we allocate resources. In the US structure, there's actually something we work on every year called the National NIPF. I'm trying to remember. It is the matrix we use where we identify what are the priority topics, what are the priority targets, and it's applicable to the entire community. All of us then take that and then translate that into, okay, what specific targets, what particular entities are we going to go after? Then you overlay the broader framework for NSA. We are a foreign intelligence organization. We do not do collection in the United States. That's against the law. We do not collect against U.S. citizens outside the United States unless we go to a court, the FISA court, and you get a specific permission. And to get the permission, you have to show that that American person is acting as an extension of either a foreign nation, a terrorist group. There's about 5 categories. So you just don't capriciously decide, hey, I'm going to target anything outside the United States. Then in the U.S., we know that we are going to encounter Americans in the collection of intelligence outside the United States. We might get an American talking to a foreign ambassador that we're very...
I know. I worry about how often I end up in the NSA
particularly
files.
Interested. So we have a series of procedures that we call masking, where we then identify, we don't refer, if we put out a report about it, we don't refer to the individual by name, we mask them. We'll say person number 1, person number 2. So there's a set of protections that are put into place. At the same time, you are working against like a nation's nuclear program. I mean, that is a tough target. That nation has put a lot of effort into it to try to make sure that foreign intelligence can't access it. So you're trying to figure out, how do you overcome their efforts? It really is amazing when you sit down to ultimately, in many cases for us at NSA, you're ultimately, there's a human sitting in a keyboard and we're getting ready to initiate an activity that's designed to penetrate a network to give us access to information that we think is applicable to our nation and its leadership, as well as our friends and allies. Almost everything, boy, the greater majority of everything we ever collect, quite frankly, we share with others, to include most of Europe. But there's a reason why I spent a lot of time in Europe when I was the director of NSA, because of our relationships both on the continent as well as with the UK that we thought were very important, both in terms of what we provide to Europe, but also, quite frankly, in terms of the insight and knowledge that Europe could provide to us. There are some European intelligence organizations that I would tell you are world class, that I really liked working with, that had great tradecraft and were very good at what they did.
How good is China?
Good. Now, everyone's a little different. I would argue if you look at the Russians, high-end capability, a high risk tolerance, really aggressive. If you look at China, becoming better, there's a pretty broad spectrum within their system, becoming much better at tradecraft and capability. Their risk tolerance, their aggressiveness is high, but their scale is the biggest. Nobody in the intelligence, not surprising for a nation of, almost 1.4 billion people, there's no other organization in the world, literally, that matches the size and the level of effort of the Chinese when it comes to espionage and spying. And don't get me wrong, every nation in the world tries to generate knowledge and understanding of the world around it. Espionage and spying has been here as long as man has been around. I don't think that's going to change. The issue we always had with our Chinese counterparts was we understand the desire to use cyber as an extension of espionage or spying. What we fundamentally have a problem with is you are using cyber as a tool of an economic war designed to strip intellectual property from non-state, non-government, from our companies, so to speak, and then you, the nation, are then turning it over to your companies. That is not the way the U.S. framework works at all.
I want our audience to know that Mike Rogers is a real cyber warrior, that you were head of U.S. Cyber Command and, taking, offensive steps when needed, not just basically doing this from a defensive security position. And I think it's an important distinction, because I don't know if you remember the first time we sort of met, hung out a little bit, was with Jane Harmon at the Wilson Center, and you came in for the you were so uncomfortable talking to any journalists. You really didn't want to talk to journalists.
Right, very early in my career as a senior military.
So we're sitting there, and you're trying to talk about deterrence and the need that we needed to establish deterrence. And I think you had just become recently head of NSA and Cyber Command. One, I saw it was painful for you, but two, you kind of took us on a journey that we were going to have to change the way we thought about what our role was, and that we were going to have to become much more vigorous and robust in the offensive dimensions to basically create some deterrence. One, have we done that? And two, should we, if we haven't?
So look, I think we have to be honest and say we have not created a level of deterrence that we want. We're not really shaping and changing Russian or Chinese behavior with respect to cyber. I think we have to acknowledge that we're not where we want to be. The biggest thing with deterrence is, remember, you have to have capability and you have to have will. Increasingly, the world is seeing the capability that the United States has in cyber. It started during my time. We, for the first time, acknowledged in the campaign against ISIS that we were using cyber offensively literally to attack, to disrupt, to destroy, to deny, and degrade ISIS capabilities and ISIS activities. And we were synchronizing what we were doing with ISIS in the network world with what we were doing on the battlefield. And it's one of the things I was proudest of in my time. We really did some great work combined with our traditional battlefield activities. We really were hitting those guys hard and having a material impact as part of a broader effort. You see the U.S. now, and I'll only speak for the U.S., is publicly acknowledging and talking about cyber. You saw it in Venezuela, you're seeing it in Iran. So there's capability, and now we're making people more aware of it. I used to argue we should be willing to talk about what we're doing to help others understand. I still don't think we're exactly where we need to be, is that I still think that the Chinese and the Russians' view is, well, they might have the capability, but they're really not going to use it. We can keep pushing pretty aggressively. I'll be curious to see, there's a new cyber strategy likely out in the near term coming from this administration. They haven't promulgated a formal cyber strategy previously. And I think you're going to see them talking about the dynamic of offensive cyber and where they think it plays from a national strategy perspective.
Do you like Estonia?
Oh man, love it. I love my time in Tallinn. You know, CyCon is a great conference. The NATO Cyber Center of Excellence
I might
is there.
in a minute bring the foreign minister of Estonia
there
and
you
hang
go.
out with us for a little bit. But I
Great
wanna say
digital-
something,
and a
little
great
bit-
digital nation.
You know, if you guys have any questions, I see one of my friends who's often here at GLOBSEC. You got a question or comment, we're going to bring a mic over to you in a second. But before that, you know, Sean Cairncross, who is now he's the National Cyber Director, right? Sean is a friend of mine. I have friends in the Trump administration. And he's under a lot of pressure right now, according to the press and Politico. And this is sort of, you know, we all used to do Politburo watching when the Soviets were around. Now we do Politburo watching in Washington to see who's in, who's out. But there are many that are saying that Sean is not up to the job, that AI is advancing so rapidly and creating a threat field that is so dramatic that he's not able to do it. And then you see Brad Smith of Microsoft and others coming out to defend Sean and say, hey, he is the guy. So you got to know, folks, if you're ever in a position of responsibility and you get debates in the public about whether you're doing a job, not a good thing. But I guess my question to you is, at the core of the substance of the critique that's coming from some of the administration is, there is a realization that AI out there matters and that other nefarious players are using AI to potentially undermine our national security in very key ways. So where do you come out on this debate? And where do you put yourself back in the role?
Sean, or in terms of
Well, you can talk
AI,
about Sean, but about AI as the threat of the moment when it comes to the world you used to govern, which is, you know, the cybersecurity, cyber sabotage, and cyber offense of the United States.
So I became the director of NSA 12 years ago, and our two biggest R&D priorities 12 years ago were AI and quantum. Because we thought, these are the technologies that are coming, they're going to shape the world around us. And I remember sitting down with the team as we were talking about our investment strategy and how we were going to try to partner with the private sector, try to partner with the academic arena to try to generate more research, more knowledge, more understanding. Because we wanted to both use it to generate advantage, and we wanted to ensure that, quite frankly, we could preclude other nations from using it to create advantage against us. That journey has only continued to accelerate, and AI now is a reality. Quantum, not quite there yet in terms of the ability to actually break encryption, but you know, Google has talked about Q-Day now being December the 31st of 2029. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were talking about, hey, the mid-30s. So everything as we see in technology is compressing. The challenge with AI, to me, is it's reflective of a series of challenges we're going to continue to see in the world. One, it's a core ubiquitous technology that is not developed by governments. Governments have no control. They're not developing it. And let's be honest, they have limited knowledge and awareness, particularly at a senior policy level, about it. Most just aren't. And Sean is a good example of that. You generally just don't find significantly technically focused individuals at senior policy levels. Now, there's a reason for that. The technical piece is one dimension of what they do. It's not necessarily the total thing. The next thing that I think is a challenge is, this goes back to a little bit where we were, I would argue, 10, 15 years ago, where there was a bit of skepticism between the private sector that was developing technologies at that point and the government. And in AI, you're starting to see that reemerge a little bit about, hey, well, what is the role of the government in using this technology? What should we be comfortable with? What should defense be able to do? And so because of that, it's starting to color a little bit the broader dynamic. You see this with Anthropic, for example, where if you look at, Glasswing and what they originally created, government was not a part of that. Now, in some ways, I'm not surprised, in part because I'm sure Anthropic thought to themselves, hey, I'm in the middle of a confrontation with the government right now. Why would I do this? My view is, look, there's a significant cybersecurity dimension of the government. You want that as part of this. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it should be a part of this.
You have a couple of minutes to hang out with us?
Sure, sure.
Let me invite Margus Sakna, Foreign Minister of Estonia, to come up and say, you like Estonia, so that's a good first start. We'll find out what he thinks of you. Mike, why don't you sit here? And do we have another mic? Okay.
Oh, there you go.
You're really, what's your name? Big round of applause for
Tony,
Anthony.
well,
I didn't even ask for this, so that's great. Marcus, thanks for
They want to hear
joining.
from you, sir. They want to hear from you.
Yeah, well, thanks for our show this morning, coming to our show this morning. I don't know how much of what you just heard that Mike Rogers shared, but it's a dicey world out there right now. It's messy, a lot of competition, and I just want to say it as it is. Estonia and this man, this foreign minister, has been out there basically saying, watch out for these times, well before these times came. The tensions with Russia, the issues of how not to be naive about this moment. So, Mr. Sakna, I just
Estonia's been saying that for over 20 years. You
Yeah.
got to go back to 2007.
Right.
You know, over
well
20
before Crimea,
right,
et
over
cetera,
20
et cetera,
years.
et cetera. So I want to ask you the same thing. Not that I know you like the United States. I ask you like Estonia. But what do you think about our national cyber and digital warfare establishment? Have we been there for you enough?
It's hard to say. U.S. You mean much more? Yeah.
Or Mike Rogers personally.
You were physically there. And
I was multiple
this is
times.
not a problem, but I think that we have no problem on cyber cooperation, and we have been waging pretty remarkable operations about accountability as well. You know, the assuring who is doing what. And I remember last year there was a really U.S. leaded 7 countries cooperation about pointing out really the Secret Services officers actually who actually came into our systems. I mean, in Europe. So this is something remarkable. So we are doing more and more. And of course, Estonia is, as you said as well, a very digital nation. 100% of our public services are online, but we are suffering more and more every year about the cyber attacks, mainly from Russia. Last year we had like more than 10,000 real stuff. So, and this cooperation is something we need to have, but it is as well based on trust. But on the cyber world, you are more expert than me, but we are collaborating a lot. And I think that the information what we give, I think that this information must be taken carefully and very seriously, because we really know what is happening in Russia.
Real quick, Mike, Estonia, I don't know if I'm sure you do know this, was under full assault from Russia. You know, basically the cyber sabotage directed against Estonia was unlike, it was something no nation that I know of had to go through. And when you go through, Estonia is now such a heavyweight in this space. I would ask you about the United States real quickly. Do we have any of the competencies or capacities in the aggregate that Estonia has developed?
I mean, it's
or
not,
how vulnerable is the United States?
It's not that we don't have competencies. It's what you see in Estonia is they took a series of events that were directed against them, and then they asked themselves, what do we need to do differently?
But it's always the lowest link is the problem, right?
But
so
it led them to believe they fundamentally had to shift. It led them to believe, hey, we got to switch to digitalization. We have to harden our systems, and we have to invest in this, and we have to make it a national priority. Anytime you go to Estonia...
So if they're at 10 as a nation, where's the United States?
Oh, it's lower. Now, the flip side is, as I used to tell my friends in Estonia, Israel's another one. Right? For Israel, for example, I go, now remember, our challenge is you're a nation of 9 million people. We're at about 340 million. With the world's largest economy. So we have to figure out how we scale the things that work in the Baltic states, how we scale the things that work in other nations, how we make that work in the US, where it's just a massive orders of magnitude different.
So Margus, I have my own network of spies and intelligence service that worked for this show. And I know that you just had some one-on-one time with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's also National Security Advisor to the President in Washington. How did that go? And was it friendly?
Yes, it is always friendly with Secretary Rubio. I know him already when I was defense minister 2016-17, and he was doing the great job in Senate, of course. But our main message was everybody's talking now about U.S. presence on military level in Europe. And we need to do it just more coordinated ways, in the meaning that if US is deciding, if President Trump is deciding to decrease the presence, it is about US President to decide it. But we are sharing the same understanding about the NATO and the deterrence and the real capabilities. And whatever US is doing, it must be happening in coordinated ways. Because we cannot lose the NATO deterrence and also the real capabilities. But it's obvious that Europe must do more, and we have said it already, 15 years, because Europe has been on defense, and I'm talking about the Baltic states, Poland, and some other countries, but as an attitude that the defense is something that we rely on US, is unconditional. But now we see President Trump's administration second time is that this is now conditional, and we need to fulfill our conditions, but it must happen in coordination with US, because we are the bordering country, and we don't want that Putin is doing and repeating this miscalculation he did in 22 in Ukraine. He was about taking Ukraine within a week or 3 days or 6 days, whatever the special operation was there, but it was total miscalculation. So we know that NATO is strong, we know that we do more, but we don't want to have any risks that Putin could calculate that actually US is not present anymore, and NATO is not united, and we have no capabilities. And of course we have capabilities, but finally the bordering countries, we are taking the first hit. So, and I think that the communication towards Russia about NATO, about US presence must be clear. And this was the main message I gave as well, the Secretary Rubio.
And are you sensing that the US government, not just Secretary Rubio, but the US system as a whole is shifting back again towards bolstering and being a full robust partner in NATO? Because that's been the big question, is how wobbly America is, right? And if America is wobbly in that partnership, what green lights or what lights does that send Moscow?
Of course, Putin is now in a worse situation than he was maybe even a half a year ago. And he's using all the opportunity to divide NATO and also Western part of the world. And what we see now, around Putin, actually, the tone has changed. And we not assume that, we know that. And the case is that the sanctions are working that Europe has been put in place. The support for Ukraine is working. But even more, I think that this deep strike hits, or actually our friend Andrei Sipiha said yesterday, deep strike sanctions are working even more. And now they're hitting the lifeline. It's close to St. Petersburg, Ust-Luga port, and so on. 60% of Russian gas and oil is going out from there. So Putin is in trouble. Even this 9th of May victory parade was not held as it should have been. And believe us, we have been under the Soviet occupation 50 years. This is a core ideological event for Russian people. And I think that even more than globally, Putin lost the face in Russia, in the face of Russian people. Though he's looking for different angles to divide us. And of course, if President Trump says that NATO is a paper tiger, or we see different public information about the troops rotations, one day is that minus 4,000 or plus 5,000, right, and so on. Mike, we don't need it for the
yeah, I think so.
But if Putin is in trouble, is that a safer Putin or a more dangerous Putin?
Well, two comments. Number one, this shows you if you project strength, you can impact Putin in his calculus. If you project strength. If you project weakness, you'll also shape his calculus. And that hasn't turned out well for Georgia. It hasn't worked out well for Ukraine. It hasn't worked out well for Estonia in the past. And I would argue it doesn't work out well for Europe or the United States when the Russians calculate weakness. What was the question again that you wanted to?
No, I wanted to ask: is a dangerous Putin, or is a concerted Putin or a limited or constrained Putin dangerous or safer? When you look at that sign, first thing I think of, if I advising a dictator that was as nasty as he was, go create a distraction somewhere in the world, go do something else. One of the things I worry about, candidly, like I'm a journalist, I can be reckless a little bit, are the distractions of the moment. What leaders are doing to distract from other problems they have, including in the United States. Right?
In the case of Putin, I don't think it makes him more dangerous. Also in the sense that, look, we are collectively, we're taking action against his policies and his actions,
Right.
but we're not arguing.
But you look at him as a rational calculator.
Well, no, my point is we're not making an argument. The answer is to remove him. As opposed to look at
Marius?
Iran, for example, where
I don't want to get this
the fact that the regime in Iran believes
behind
their lives are in danger, their role is in danger. Look at how that has shaped their calculus differently.
If I may add, though I don't buy these arguments that now if Putin is in a shaky position, he's more dangerous. So, as you said as well, we are fighting against his regime and policies, which is a direct danger for us. And I remember these times when Soviet Union was collapsing. And I'm very frank, for the Baltic states, pretty many very high-level politicians and big countries, maybe US as well, said that let's act now normally, because there is a fear of escalation constantly that Putin and Russia is playing. So we were told as well that maybe not full independence is good now. Maybe just wait, more sovereignty. But no, the Soviet Union collapse is something very bad. It can never happen. Maybe a different regime, more democracy. Right. This is bullshit, sorry. It's a bullshit, and we are not taking responsibilities of Putin's regime in Russia, but we must assure that Europe and the western part of the world is secured. And we know exactly how to talk with Putin. Every new compromise is a new red line, and we are losing abilities about establishing our terms. So I'm not buying this kind of stuff that for not escalation, let's make a deal with Putin. This is a total disaster. And finally I say as well that only one guy left Kremlin for retirement. It was Khrushchev.
Yeah.
So, and Putin is fighting for his life, and this is not our concern, what is happening with his life.
I want to go to this gentleman in the audience here, but do you think Putin will leave like Khrushchev did?
No. I think that, our intelligence says as well, and this is public information, that during the last couple of months, the tone around Putin elite has changed. And as well, he's taking the extra measures to be more isolated. And as well, you see more tensions in Russia. So I believe that we cannot give the helping hand now when Trump is, backing out from these talks, that Europe should jump in right now. Because this is exactly that Putin wants, to replace US, to put Europe to mediating position. It means that if you're mediating something,
and you're absolutely against that.
No, absolutely against right now, because we don't see that Putin is changing the goals. But I wanted to say is the change in real life is coming from Russia. If we have the strategic patience to put more pressure on.
I just like this guy because he's been here since the beginning, and you're a great member of the audience. You were like not one of the, so I've seen you at many GLOBSEC. So your thoughts or questions?
Thank you very much. Pavel Macko, former Vice Chief of Defense in Slovakia and GLOBSEC's Future Defense and Security Council member. I would have a question for both of you. In 2016, in NATO, we have declared cyber as a warfighting domain. We even said that in case of a large-scale hybrid attack, we can even declare the Article 5. Now, Admiral, you were fortunate to be the commander of the Cyber Command. But if I look at NATO, actually just few nations have established something like Cyber Command. Even fewer admitted that we might need also those offensive capabilities, because that's what gives you a chance to establish a deterrence in that warfighting domain. If I look what is happening, and if I look at the NATO meetings, at the moment we are already, at least in the hostilities phase, in cyberspace, in a hybrid domain. So it seems to me like our deterrence in these domains have failed. So my questions to both of you is, how can we reconstitute this deterrence in cyber? Because cyber hybrid eventually can turn to the hot war.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike?
Look, as I said before, we have to acknowledge, I agree very much, we haven't deterred here. I'm not sure that Article 5 is the right way. One of the challenges for the alliance in this is, remember, critical infrastructure is not owned by the sovereign state. It's not owned or controlled by the alliance. It's controlled by private companies, private entities within these sovereign states. So we got to figure out how we make that dynamic work. I do believe, as we have been talking previously, it shows you we need to take the examples we're seeing in Estonia. We need to see the examples we're seeing in Ukraine, I would argue right now. You look at the level of digital resilience that they have created, there's some great lessons for us to learn from that, to apply. I'd like to see the alliance, I'd like to see my own nation digging into what can we take from Ukraine, what can we take from Estonia and other nations that have shown a high level of digital resilience, digital security, and see what we can do. At the moment, I don't see as much effort focused on that as I wish there was.
Marcus.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question and mentioning as well that that NATO decided to create this cyber command. And as well, when I was defense minister in 2016-17, I was responsible for creating that for Estonian defense forces. But it was not only about defense forces. Actually, we are taking it much more larger base because we have this total defense concept in our society. Because we have 1.3 million people. We have reserve army, and so we have this defense league as well, which is military voluntary organization, and we created the defense league cyber command. So this is about not technology, what everybody is thinking about the cyber only. It's about how to build up your organization, how to actually educate your people since kindergarten, how you bring in the private sector, because we have listed all the IT sectors. I'm not talking about now defense, meaning the strategic infrastructure and these companies and energy, telecoms and banks and so on. This is obvious. But about the private sector companies who has any kind of capabilities, they are natural part of our resilience, of our operations, in the meaning of bringing them in. So this is totally different concept than just like experts sitting around the table and figuring out the best technical solutions. So, and of course, on that scale, it's really hard to make these kind of changes in your societies if the knowledge and this threat is not there on this basic level. We were under cyber attack from Russia 2007, heavily, and public sector services and banking and everything. We survived somehow because we improvised. But we didn't want to have this kind of approach again. So we are much more prepared, more ready to share our experience amongst our NATO friends. But also I see more and more attention on NATO level to something common. I'm not expert on that, but the only thing I know is it's not about technologies only. It's about actually the knowledge, the understanding, and the culture and organization and the attitude. And about Article 5, you know, I always say that Article 5 is not just like the laundry machine button. You just push it and everything is starting to work. Of course, people think normally that the war is like the war movies. And you have the train somewhere in St. Petersburg train station, orchestra is playing, and then the war is starting, everybody's happy, and then 2.5 hours, and then finally the victory and the losers and the heroes. It's not there. It's already here, we can say, the war. Now the question is, Article 5. We have hybrid attacks, cyber attacks, we have many, many other new foggy things. But finally, Article 5 is that one or the other member states is really, really feeling and feeling the direct attack against territory and sovereignty. And then it must work. But this hybrid cyber stuff is foggy, but it's very dangerous. And last thing I say, what Estonia is doing now, it's not only about cyber defense. We prepare our e-governance, all the services for this momentum when we have no control over our territory. We can run 100% of our services, Estonian state, without that. It doesn't mean that actually we would like to have it. Of course, we do everything. But we don't take any risks because everything is digital already now. And this is something we are ready to share amongst our best friends as well.
You know, Marcus, I don't know if you know Markus Ferber, but he was the first participant in our show this morning, long-term serving member of the European Parliament, German. He's head of the Hans Seidel Foundation in Germany. And I told him you were going to be coming up here, and I said, every time I'm with Markus Stachna or many other leaders in Eastern Europe or the Baltics, the fervor, the passion, the decibel level of concern is extremely high about Russia and ongoing nefarious activities that may lay in the future. And I guess I said, as you kind of go westward some of you have the sense that that decibel level of concern declines. And he says he is absolutely right, that there's no one that feels the pressure and tension like you do. So it was an acknowledgement of that. I guess my question to you is what has to happen to fix that? That's part one. Part two is how from your view, do we go from Ukraine, Russia as sort of you can't call it a frozen conflict given the number of people that are dying every day, right? There's a complacency that's built out there about a really horrible war and conflict and situation right now, which is not on the front pages every day, but so many people are dying every day. How do we move, from your advice, both of your advice, do you go from something that looks frozen to many people and that has fallen off the front pages to something that's higher priority that could result in a more definitive rollback of Russia?
About the first question, of course, we see the difference of the understanding that immediate or direct threat from Russia through the years. And it is understandable that these nations were closer, who still remember how it was to be under the occupation with losing every fifth of our Estonian people. This is reality. All these stories are in our families. But many people think that it's about fear, though, that we are afraid and we are afraid of Russia, but it's not true. We are just very realistic. We have been living there like 7,000 years or 10,000 years, so we have planned to live there another 10,000 years. So this is the main thing. And we know what to do. That's the main thing. We are not afraid because we know exactly what to do. So we are trying to patiently explain. But now I see happily, in a very wrong reasons, that this knowledge and the feeling is coming more and more to the western part of Europe as well. But too much, it's based on fear. So they need to understand that we, the Finnish, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland.
Powerful statement.
Yeah, we are not afraid, but we just know what to do, how to talk to Putin. We know it. Please trust us this time as well. You didn't trust us when Georgia happened 2008. You didn't trust us when Ukraine started 2014 because me and many other our colleagues from Baltic states, we have been called like Russophobic crazy politicians. So, and this is one thing. The second thing is that I'm very frank. It was unfortunately Putin who woke up all Europe. It was President Trump. It was President Trump who said that actually it is your responsibility, which is right, actually. European security is about European responsibility, and we would be very happy that US is part of that, because if anything is happening in Europe in real life, then US will be in deep trouble, really, economically, politically, everything. So this is something we need constantly to work with. So about Ukraine, what could happen? I'm repeating that we see now the first signs that actually all the sanctions, all the support, and as well Ukraine capabilities to hit the Russian economy into the heart, they're starting to work. But I already see the gold rush. Who will be the next guy who's actually maybe getting the Nobel Prize if Trump didn't get it because of this? So it's too early. Now we need to have like a strategic patience to put more pressure on Russia and then bring Putin into negotiations. The second thing is, it's not about Ukraine anymore. Maybe the first couple of years it was about Ukraine to make this kind of agreement with Russia. It's about Europe. It's already global. We just had a dinner last night with Emirates foreign ministers about Hormuz and the region. You can see that the Ukraine jumped in as a security deliverer, really experienced. It's about the industry, defense industry base in Europe and so on. We need to understand what kind of Europe we want in the future, which can keep the peace. And it's about Ukraine in. Ukraine must give us as well the security guarantees, not the other way around only. So there's a whole picture. We need to agree, put more pressure on Russia, and the change coming from Russia. We cannot allow Putin to bring us into this mediating position.
Right.
Then, we are losing the European support and pressure on Russia.
Mike, what do you think? I mean, and I want to ask this of you carefully. I mean, I've interviewed Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, even President Biden. And they would get furious at me when I'd say, are you basically trying to create a frozen conflict, get us to parity inside Russia? They would blow up furiously and say, absolutely not. But look at the result of what we had, that early on, Ukraine was not given so many options to help deliver a knockout blow or to deter some of what was happened. So I guess I would ask you, how do you reverse whether they admit that in fact the United States helped generate what has looked to many people as a frozen conflict, which has now been demoted in terms of its national security priority in Washington? I mean, I'm just interested in how you would advise to unwind
So
that
I
for the
guess, look,
European
if I
audience.
look back over the course of the conflict, war by incrementalism is not an optimal strategy.
Yeah.
It's just not.
That's what we did.
And in many ways, that's what we opted to do.
Right.
I understand why they opted to do it, but my argument always at the time was, you don't win a war by doing this incremental kind of approach to this.
Right.
You're in it to win or you're not.
So we were wrong.
No, I'm not going to say we're wrong. I was saying I thought it's taken us longer to achieve the progress that we've made than it should have, than it perhaps could have, because I thought we tended to take a little incremental approach to this. The lesson I take from this is, number one, you have to give Ukraine credit for a level of resilience and innovation that most people didn't anticipate they were going to be able to do. They have exceeded expectation for most. Secondly, keep the pressure on. Now is not the time to walk away from this. Look at how collective action, look at how the ability to bring together the private sector and governments, look at how the ability to look at this as more than just a conflict about warfare, about how we bring in information, about how we bring in the digital piece. That has created a much better current dynamic than we probably anticipated. My view is, so keep this pressure on. Now is not the time to walk away. You want Putin to calculate that the West has both capability and intent to apply it, that he is going to have to anticipate and deal with strength, not weakness. Every time he perceives weakness, as highlighted, his history suggests when he perceives weakness, he thinks that's advantage for him, and that's opportunity for him to be aggressive. That's not the way we want his calculus to be.
Right. Marcus, I ran into John Bolton, former ambassador of the United States to the United Nations, very pugnacious, colorful guy, one time going up to the Hill. We have a long relationship. I used to have a blog called the Washington Note. Well, I still have it, actually. And I used to have Bolton Watch on it. I wrote about John Bolton every day for 21 months. And he blames my blog for why he never got confirmed. But we're sort of friends. And I said, what are you doing, Ambassador Bolton? He says, I'm going up to Capitol Hill to try to talk to senators about how dangerous it is to become isolationist. We need to keep the Republican Party becoming an isolation. That he worried that a lot of the currents in the Republican Party were strategic contraction and withdrawal from the world, United States. Now, I set this up because President Trump and the MAGA movement seems to have done a U-turn, that it's not actually withdrawing, it's very engaged. Venezuela, Cuba, Greenland, Iran, whatever it may be. And the muscular adventure, the little adventure in Iran is something that's out there. There's a lot of criticism in Europe of what the United States has done in Iran. My question is, on the other hand, they see a very muscular United States out there in the world. So do you think Iran and this collision we've had over that and the tension between Europe and the United States, has Trump's Iran actions enhanced the sense of American power? Or has it basically made you very concerned about American power in the world?
You asked me a very complicated question. I think that the main concern why you see that pretty many leaders in Europe are very skeptical what is happening now in Iran was that actually we didn't know anything about that. So it was an action that US took, but brought us all in a meaning of as a consequences. We are all connected to the trade and gas and oil and fertilizers and whatever. And we didn't know the plan. What is the plan? The second thing is, of course, from Estonian perspective, we were the first, actually I was the first guy who said that if Trump said that he needs the NATO, European allies to jump in, of course we are ready to do, we already consider what to do because we have been always there and we expect the other way around. And this is the opportunity. But the case is now there's a heavy struggle. Everybody's paying. And we just, this is some kind of not correct information as well, that European allies, we have not opened our bases for US for the different operations and so on. We did it. There is one base in Spain which is not open, but this has the historical background. Why? But my question is now, what will happen in the future? So, because it may be one of the most serious crises, not on military level, but as well as a global trade, economical results, and so on. Maybe not even for Europe, but actually many other developing countries, you know, this is the question, and we are there to be part of the solution. But I don't know actually what is the solution. I don't know even what is the status right now. We're having this debate on these talks or negotiations. You know, that's the concern. And we have different coalitions. You know, we have a coalition of the willing. So we have initiative and mission. It's not actually mission about France and UK. I don't know what to do exactly in what conditions. So US has been requested and Estonia is ready to participate, whatever we have. So, but we don't know the conditions and what is the outcome. And it proves as well that, you know, Iran is more dangerous, actually, and what I see as a result as well, the GCC countries are pissed off totally. Of course, they are not telling anything about US, you know, but it brings Europe more closer to this region. I see it. More communication, more common plans.
They're pissed off about the moment? They're pissed
about
off
Iran,
about
the moment, about
how it happened?
How it happened and what is the status, because they already using their reserves. So this is totally new situation for them as well. But in that regard, you said as well that US, you know, dealt with Venezuela leader Maduro. I was not a great fan of this guy anyway. So whatever happens in Cuba, this regime is not okay. But now the question is what is the long-lasting, what is the actual consequences on that? Let's coordinate that. That's my message.
Well, we've got, we're still waiting for our next guest. I've been told you have a hard stop, so I'm going to keep Mike Rogers on the show. Oh, you got to go too? Oh, you got to go? So I'm going to
have to go as well.
My guest, my show. I'm going to bring up someone here. I'm going to bring this gentleman right up here. So let's give a big round of applause to Markus Tsahkna, Foreign Minister of Estonia.
Thank you.
I should also, we didn't get to the Baltic Nordic presidency, but that's a whole nother show another day. You know, and Mike Rogers, former head of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command. Thank you both for joining us. Great. So we do not have our next guest here. Sami Shukri, someone tell me, please. Hello? We have no one here. Okay, so some of our people are going. I'm going to bring you up on stage. Come on up and join us. Hey, come join us here. Grab a mic. All right, and I'm going to just do this real quickly here. Martin Polachek. Hey, everybody. Martin Polachek is here. Martin, remind everybody, because I was talking about Ukraine. You lived in Ukraine for a while, but remind everybody what you do now.
I was one of the people that opened the GLOBSEC Kiev office. We were the first international organization that opened an office after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine. And I'm very proud that the Ukrainian voice is still very much loud and clear in GLOBSEC, and the support for Ukraine is still very strong. What I'm working on now is I'm the point in between GLOBSEC and Emil Foundation. That's a Dutch foundation with the mission to bring back all the children that were forcefully removed from Ukraine to Russia.
What's the scale of that?
This is very hard to tell, Steve, because no one really has the right numbers. So we have the number 20,000 that was made public by the Ukrainian side, but that's only the number of well-reported cases. Most probably that's from the file that was used for the ICC for the warrant on President Putin. But there are people who say in the field that we might be talking about 100,000 to 150,000 kids. Before the ICC warrant, Russians themselves were talking about 350,000 children that they liberated. Now, plus that, we need to account 1.5 million children that are still in occupied territories, and those children are being drawn through very radical ideological education. These children are militarized, and they are being prepared to attack Europe, not Ukraine, Europe. So as the Nobel Prize peace winner, Alexandra Matvichuk, said in this very place yesterday, this is not only a problem of Russia and Ukraine conflict, this is a problem of potential future army of Ukrainian children going to Europe.
Well, let me just ask you one last question. Our former foreign minister of Egypt has just arrived. But it takes an ecosystem to do that. And one of the things that I've been reading a lot is the internal dissonance inside Russia about their own conflict with Ukraine. That the unpopularity of this conflict is finally growing, and I would even say of Putin. But I would say, how do you generate an ecosystem that's so evil to you know, as you've written about and talked about with the radicalization of these children, et cetera? How do you do that when there's so much internal discomfort with what Russia's doing?
I think that when we talk about internal discomfort, it's mostly like small islands inside the very big discomfort that is about life in general. Because dictatorship and totalitarian regimes are not built on ideas or ideals, they are built on fear. And the main emotion in Russia is fear. So they might be a little bit discontent that the prices of food or fuel are going up.
Right.
But I don't think that we will see like a huge revolutionary movement to get rid of the regime.
Well, can we all give a big round of applause to Martin Polachek for his heroic service, essentially opening the GLOBSEC office in Ukraine. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you. And let me invite my friend Sameh Shoukry. Sameh is the former foreign minister of Egypt. I believe now he's a member of the parliament. Are you a member of the parliament now? Good to see you, Sameh. And former Egyptian ambassador to Washington, was a good friend of mine there. And so we've been going on, so we had a little bit of a break.
I'm still a good friend of yours. Right?
What's that?
I'm still a good friend.
You still are. You know, I think the last time we had a chat was on the stage at the Aspen Security Forum, and we had a good time there. But I just want to sort of start out, you know, it's great that you are here. GLOBSEC has gone global. It's always really been global, but it's great to have, you know, such important global voices here. And I've always been interested in kind of, you know, the very contending strategic maps of concern that various players at GLOBSEC have. And you might, I'd love to hear, you know, some sort of prioritization. You know, if we're sitting in Cairo, how does the world look from Cairo? You know, those big maps in terms of, you know, how your neighborhood looks, it's really big closer. I mean, what are your biggest priorities and concerns that this room should be hearing?
Well, thank you, Steve. Egypt has a multifaceted attention span. It considers itself, of course, an Arab country, an African country, a Mediterranean country. Its association to the
it's a huge
Islamic domain, and thereby our attention span is quite diversified. But of course, the region has been plagued by conflict, and we are affected by that conflict. To our eastern border, we have Gaza and the dire humanitarian situation that has developed there, the continuation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and the lack of a light at the end of the tunnel there, and the ensuing conflicts that emerge, the settler activities and violence. We have Libya and the stagnation, political stagnation, and the consequences of that situation. We have, of course, an ongoing civil war in Sudan, the escalating conflicts in the Horn of Africa, the issues of Nile water security, and of course, the Israeli-American war with Iran. For all of those areas of conflict, they have an impact on our security and our ability to deal with the ensuing consequences, of course, economic being part of the global economy and how it has affected Egypt, in particular, the rising costs of fuel. And we are a major importing country when it comes to energy, and heavily subsidized energy for our, as a matter of the social network that exists. So we need to be very in tune with the various issues. We have strong relationships to the United States, a strategic relationship, and we need to continue to exert our efforts in resolving all of these conflicts through diplomatic and peaceful means. We do everything that we can, taking advantage of our various associations, and both at the bilateral and multilateral levels. But also of concern to us is the current world order that seems to be imploding as we speak, the lack of adherence to international law, to the mechanisms of multilateralism, and its ability to function, the stagnation and the polarization that has been the main characteristic of the current state of affairs, and which is bothering because without a rule-based order, then it is a matter of might makes right, and we are all vulnerable in that regard.
You know, you mentioned so many different layers so clearly in your role, and you're chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the House now, after having served as foreign minister, but so many other roles. I mean, you've been doing every role. I remember running into you on the streets of Istanbul, and you were there for a nuclear conference focusing on, you know, nuclear non-proliferation around the world, et cetera. So you're playing in all the fields, but I'm really interested, not just in this, but, you know, definitely the Israel, Gaza, Egypt, Jordan, the neighborhood that you're in. Why have we failed so badly to solve this ulcer, and what should we do?
For lack of political will. Those who have the ability to influence the situation have not undertaken the necessary role that can fulfill the resolution of the conflict. There has been a double standard in terms of the application of principles when it comes to Israel-Palestine. Egypt led the way in a peace treaty with Israel, hoping that that would encourage the Israeli policy towards a recognition of a two-state solution. But subsequently, we have now an Israeli government that publicly declares that it does not endorse a two-state solution, and at the same time does not present the international community with an alternative how to deal with 4 million plus Palestinian inhabitants of this area, with a total disregard of the principles of the self-determination, of the non-viability of occupation by military force, and has neglected the various overtures that have been made, whether it's the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002 or whether it's the subsequent Abraham Accords, all areas that should have been incentives for normalization of relations.
Is there a track that still keeps the Abraham Accords alive, or are they effectively dead now, given what you see?
I can't speak on behalf of those who signed the Abraham Accords. Egypt blessed and endorsed them as a means of further creating the conditions and the atmosphere in the region to facilitate the creation of a Palestinian state and the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Only on the Egypt side, but what do you think about more broadly in the neighborhood?
Well, there's turbulence in the neighborhood, and I think a lot of the concentration that maybe was present previous to the conflict in Iran related to normalization was maybe premature, but certainly the current situation has distracted from the overall dimensions of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, but also the issues of normalization.
So I don't know if you're going to agree with this framing, but if you were to read some of the analysis of the PLA in China about the United States, it's really interesting to read reports about how they see the other big powers in the world. And for a long time, the fad has been America's in strategic contraction. There are voids around the world. These were opportunities for China and other powers. Do you see the United States in strategic contraction, and what is that doing to your neighborhood? What is that doing in Africa? What is it doing in the Middle East? What are the voids that are being created that you think we need to be sober about and filling? Or is that a misreading of the moment? Is reading American strategic contraction, because I sort of see us militarily active all over the place. I mean, how do you see it?
It's a contradiction. U.S. military action is in the Middle East and in the Western Hemisphere, the escalating rivalry with China. I can't say that a superpower of the dimensions of the United States can recede from an international role and presence. We have Secretary Rubio today visiting India, and of course there are very broad dimensions to that relationship and how it can support a process within the security architecture of Southeast Asia. So the issues of American isolationism, I think, are overstated. And we rely on the U.S. Maintaining its involvement in the Middle East. We view it as a productive involvement as long as it can exert what it has in terms of leverage to be able to deal with the various conflicts of the region. That is putting aside, of course, Iran, which is a quagmire in itself that the U.S. has to deal with.
How about another dimension? We talk so much about Russia here, Russia in Europe, Russia in Ukraine, Russia around the world. Russia's also in Africa. Russia's also in Egypt. Russia's also in Libya. Russia's on the edge. I've talked to some pretty significant, I won't name them, significant UAE and other, really I would say strategically significant people who said they need Russia in there as a balancer with the U.S. So Russia's part of the picture even in your own country. Is Russia a hedge for Egypt? I mean, and should we be more honest about that?
Not a hedge, but it is a long-standing historic relationship, and Egypt has always diversified its relationship in terms of its national security interests and its economic interests. We have a strategic relationship to the United States that does not intersect with our relationship to Russia or to China or to the BRICS or to the various other associations that we have, as long as it serves the interests of Egypt and its people. And it is a benevolent relationship that is not built on rivalry or antagonism, but one on mutual benefit and mutual respect.
What are Egypt's strategic ambitions?
Primarily, of course, is to maintain its security, its ability to fulfill the aspirations of its people, to deal with the economic challenges that it currently faces, issues of prosperity, security, and stability for our region and for our broader region. As I mentioned, the Mediterranean, its relationship with the European Union. All of this are factors and spheres of attention and importance to Egypt, but our basic strategic goals is the preservation of Egypt as a unified country with all of the focus on the prosperity of Egyptians.
So your intelligence divisions are really good in Egypt. I've hung out with your intelligence people, and I know that you were in that world as well. Did you know Iran was coming?
We, I think, were early on to recognize the dangers associated with fundamentalism, and Iran certainly represented. Egypt was the only country that did not have diplomatic relations for the last 4 decades with Iran because of our lack of acceptance of the ideology associated with the exporting revolutionary fundamentalist ideologies into the region. So we have seen the extension of Iranian influence in the Arab domain, whether in Yemen or in Iraq or in Syria or in Lebanon, and of course the destabilizing events that have been associated to policies by Iran, the nuclear program, and again here my background in nuclear non-proliferation extends beyond Iran. Iran certainly posed a threat, but we have a non-signatory to the non-proliferation treaty, which is Israel, recognized to have at least 200 nukes at its disposal. So we deal with issues from a principled position, and we apply the same standards, but certainly Iran was always a question.
I want to ask you another question about that. I also want to ask you about Egypt's equities in Europe. And I want to note, well, I saw Willy Moltorer here, but he may have moved on. The chairman of the board of GLOBSEC was here, but he moved on. But I may come to hear one of you others for a question in just a moment. Kathleen Coker or someone, so get ready. But I'm interested in, were you with the UAE foreign minister and others last night for dinner?
No.
Okay, so there was a dinner last night, and a lot of this was discussed. I was not there, but it's come up several times in discussion. One of the things that we know is that many of the Gulf states advised against taking military action against Iran in the way that it was unfolding. But once you had, don't leave the job undone. That's essentially been the message. I guess my question to you is that, Prime Minister Netanyahu successfully convinced President Trump to move forward collectively on this. Very clearly, Netanyahu wants to keep going. President Trump, I think, very clearly does not want to keep going, wants an off-ramp. But you didn't get regime change. You didn't get a change in the essential character of the Iranian government. Is Iran tomorrow a far more dangerous player in the world, or is it contained?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer.
But you're a strategist. What would you think?
Iran is part and parcel of the region in terms of size, in terms of population, in terms of resources, and of course, potentially militarily, and I don't have the information, but it has been degraded militarily, maybe not as substantially as the US and Israel might wish, and I think the political dimensions of its relationships to the region will necessarily have to be impacted by what has happened. But I think we have to wait and see how this conflict is going to be resolved and on what basis before we can really assess the role of Iran in the future. I think there was mention of the years it would take to regain confidence between Iran and its GCC neighbors. That again will have an impact on how the relationship and how Iranian policy develops. We don't have a clear idea as to the governing structure in Iran and what its policies will be post this conflict.
In a moment, we're going to bring up Maciej Witucki, who is the member of the board of GLOBSEC. He's about the president-elect of Business Europe. I am interested. You're in Europe. We're in Europe. I mean, I usually run into you in Europe or something like this. But I mean, what are Egypt's stakes in Europe as we're sort of looking at, nations trying to find their way in a very different topography of global foreign affairs? What are the opportunities with Europe that didn't exist a few years ago?
Well, we have a long-standing relationship with Europe vis-à-vis the association agreement with Europe, with the European Union. And again, we have a very strong bilateral relations with all of the European countries. And it is built on our desire to maintain...
Which country is your favorite?
Not a favorite, but at least in size of cooperation, we would have to look to the UK, France, Germany, and Italy as the major economic powerhouses of Europe. But the relationship extends far beyond our strategic relations to Cyprus and Greece, for example, and its impact on the Mediterranean security architecture. So it's both political and economic, the need to open and maintain channels of communication to arrive at solutions to the conflicts and to stabilize our region, but also to extend that understanding to the principles that should govern the relationship between Egypt and the EU in resolving the conflict areas and in maintaining peace and security internationally.
Sameh, you're now elected, so you ran for office?
No, I'm actually appointed.
You're appointed, okay.
President has
I remember the last question I asked you in Aspen was about, you were right before an Egyptian election, and I said, how's it going to come out? You said, oh, you're going to do well, and I said, isn't that a problem that you know? And I'm interested in, you know, the state of democracy around the world, the health of democracy, whether it matters, whether or not you know, this is just sort of an illusion in terms of looking at the success of a country like China, which is delivering. I'm just interested, because you were one of the hot seats of the Arab Spring, what is the health of the social contract inside Egypt today? What should we be learning or noting that we don't know? And what are the blind spots you worry about when it comes to the stability of your own country?
No, I think, of course, democracy is an important component of any healthy society, and for Egypt and for any other country, it's an aspirational issue which is always in evolution and always is developing. So we aspire to continue to enforce and to consolidate our democratic processes and mechanisms, and we will continue to do so to the best interest of the Egyptian people. Currently, the degree of let us say, support that the public has for the current government and the leadership is quite stable, is recognizing that there is an acceptance of policies, both domestic and foreign, and that the stability of Egypt has been a main component of those policies to be able to deal with the challenges of economic development and prosperity for Egyptians. I think the turbulence in the region has reinforced the importance of stability, of continuity, and that we will continue to, I believe, the government and the institutions of governance, whether it's the legislative or the executive, will continue to cooperate for the best interests of Egyptians within the context of the institutional nature of Egypt. Being 70,000 years old, I think we know something about centralized institutional governments that can fulfill the aspirations of their people.
You're such a seasoned diplomat. I've known you for so many decades now in doing this. You know, I just want to ask you, how do you see the pipeline of talent to generate future generations of people like yourself who are obsessively committed to a kind of foreign affairs that's smart, that's healthy, that's improving the world, and not just transactional, narcissistic, and kind of dim? I mean, and I say this as a compliment to you because you've been at it, but I do worry about, we have a lot of young people in this room, and I want to have just a moment of reflection that the truth is that in many of our societies, we're not generating a good pipeline of the Richard Holbrooks, of the Brzezinskis, of the, you know, the folks that are out there, and I put you in that camp. So I just want to say, what do we have to do to get that right? Because to me, it seems to be a lot worse pipeline than we used to have.
Again, it's highlighting the importance of public service. It's regaining trust in the institutions that serve the public and attracting. I think in our case, at least the Egyptian diplomatic service, being over 100 years old, has established itself quite securely as an institution of sovereignty and national relevance, and we have a very stringent selection process. But it is highlighting for the youth the importance of public service, regaining the trust in institutions and the ability to serve within the conscience of the interests of the nation.
Let's give a big round of applause to House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman and former Foreign Minister of Egypt, Sameh Shoukry. Sameh, great to see you. Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Okay, we now have the last member of this little morning show. Who's been here all morning? Who's been here? My friend right here. I wish I had a gold medal. I sort of feel like you've been through the 10K race and you got to get a t-shirt or a mug or a gold medal for being here since the morning. It's been an interesting experiment, I think, to basically talk to so many different personalities about so many different issues. And we're going to finish with Europe. So let me invite to the stage Maciej Witucki. Maciej, great to see you. He is a member of the board of directors of GLOBSEC, and he's the president-elect of Business Europe, about which one. Hey, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Thank you so much. And I guess congratulations. Right? Good to see you. Oh, thank you for more water here. We've been going since early this morning. This is like a telethon, but we're not asking anyone for money. But it's been a fascinating morning. So first of all, thank you for your service to GLOBSEC. We've known each other from that quarter for a long time. But now tell our audience about Business Europe.
Yeah, so Business Europe is the largest association of business associations across Europe, so it's 36 countries, 42 organizations, representing roughly 25 million companies. So by far the largest organization, the only one being introduced in the social dialogue by the Treaty of Maastricht. So we are the only official representative of the employers in front of the trade unions towards the Commission.
So I guess my question is, when I probably bring in a bunch of American CEOs or CEOs from Asia, but it's usually, CEOs anywhere else around Europe, they just look at Europe as a regulatory superstate. Do businesses here look at Europe as a regulatory superstate?
Yes, they do for a long time, but
yeah.
When businesses
so
are very
part
pragmatic.
Of your job then to try to toss off those bindings and constraints?
It's a part of the business to cope with this kind of constraints. At the same time, two positive elements, if I may spread the message. Number one, that you see now the understanding on the side of the Commission and the member states that it's enough. In the sense of we've seen since 2 years the new term of President von der Leyen. You see dramatic change. So the openness to meet with business, the openness to discuss with business, and the understanding that the European social and economical model will not be sustainable if there are no taxes. There will be no taxes if there is no growth, if there is no business. So it's tough to explain to Europeans that money is not being printed by the Central European Bank, but it's produced by the taxes. But I think that this is understood. This is number one. And number two, if I may, there's a big change also on the side of the business. I've been campaigning for 12 months, visiting all European capitals. And what you see from the business community, that most probably we are more federalist than any other movements in Europe since the founders in the 50s. So Germans, French, Italians, Poles, we all understood that no country can stand up to America, Asia on its own. So we have to work together. So two good news. It's not yet a guarantee of success, but this is what I can kind of pass as a message we see.
So whenever you move a percentage of GDP, 1% of GDP on anything, it's a big, big number. You move 2 or 3%, it's a staggering number. And so when you see the shifts towards much more serious military spending, and you've been part of the GLOBSEC story for a long time, so you know this, and everybody seems to be willfully saying, yeah, we're going to do it, we're going to go that way, but it's got to create winners and losers inside countries. Where is business? Who's going to pay for this? Taxpayers, businesses, tomorrow's generations of people. We're seeing, debt limits broken through that have been part of the covenant inside Europe and European Monetary Union. So I guess my question to you is, does that element of this new rah-rah thing about how we're all going to spend more in defense in Europe, does that worry the business community as, weakening the planks of solvency?
Yeah, I know, but somehow we have no choice. Without giving the name, one of the social partners in Brussels told me, listen, why we spend this money on the tanks, we should spend it on schools and on the kindergartens. Right. I said, fine, let's don't spend it, and let's, by the way, don't spend on the kindergartens. Russians will build them for us in the future if we don't buy tanks, if we don't build defense capabilities. So we have no choice but to spend this money. Now, all the point is how to keep as much as possible of this money, reasonable amounts, within Europe, because clearly today we have no capacities. We will have to buy mostly from the US, Israel, Korea.
Yeah, why is the defense industrial base in Europe so shitty?
Because we haven't been spending for years. Means we have been, every single country, a good example is, every single country in Europe produces its own rifle, for the National Day parade. And the quantity is just enough, big enough for the National Day parade to be proud that the Czechs have the CZ and the Poles have the whatever Radom and the Germans have whatever other Mauser or whatever it is. While Americans just sign a contract for the US Army with a Swiss brand. I don't want to do a product placement, but the Swiss rifle will be the rifle as Beretta. Italian Beretta was a pistol of the U.S. Army. Now a Swiss rifle will be supporting U.S. military. So those are the movements. This fragmentation of the market.
Right.
Each of us have been producing 5 tanks and 10 rifles just for the National Day parade. So this is the reason. And the capacities, even today, there's this obsession of 155 millimeter ammunition. This was kind of big buzz in the first years of Ukrainian war. But there are still very much nationalistic movements with small quantities, no guarantees of volumes. So those projects outside maybe of Slovakia, they are not moving because no guarantees, no volumes. The Ukrainians are the only ones coming with volumes and with predictability. So it's still not done, but at least, and that's what I said about the second mandate of President von der Leyen, there is awareness and there is movement. But Europe have never been to move quickly, so it was built to move slowly and prevent us from future wars. So to change from the slow Europe to the rapid Europe, it takes time.
You're from Poland, and I think one of the things that I think is been a mistake many of us that are looking at Europe is I always looked at Poland as just a manufacturing, industrial kind of easy blue-collar workforce that could jump into this. Same with the Czech Republic, engineers, et cetera. That when you kind of look at it, and we're sort of looking at the needs for Ukraine, and just to be honest, Europe has actually stepped up. I remember talking to the CEO of, I think it's called CSG. CSG is the arms producer in Czech Republic, CZG or something of the sort, and they were producing. He told me all of Europe, in terms of ammo, was producing 300,000 units a year at the beginning of the recent conflict with Ukraine and Russia. Russia had 14 million units stockpiled, and now CSG alone is producing 300,000 units a year. So the numbers matter, but the reason I say it is, when it comes from defense industrial base, you are producing and doing things. It just seemed to me that we all thought Poland or the Czech Republic or many Eastern European nations would be able, because of abandoned facilities, things they had to move much more quickly in terms of providing that industrial backbone needed for this conflict and war. Why do you think that hasn't happened, even in your own country?
Well, it's happening. It's happening slowly. It's a level of awareness, but also those are simple the capabilities, and once again, volumes being requested per continent. If you don't do it together, please remember, you cannot load a Polish howitzer with a French 155 ammunition and vice versa. So we are at the order. We have those famous legends about standardizing the banana, which is not true. But we never standardized the 155 ammunition. So because of this, the volumes are still ridiculous compared to the ones of Russia, or even to the capabilities of Ukraine. So I'm getting back. There's a point in the Letta report. It's all written. Now the question is how quickly we will move. In the Letta report, you have a clear vision of the consolidation of the defense market. The number one. The second one is telecom. The third one, I think it's a financial market. So the directions there. Now, will we be able to overpass the nationalistic discussions with the, by the way, defense is a small business in numbers of people employed, but it's a bit like the peasants. A small number of people with a very high level of membership in trade unions, so almost as loud as the tractors blocking Brussels. So it's a nationalistic movement. Is also the behavior of the egoistic behavior per country in the defense companies. While if we would be collaborating at the European level, all those guys would have plenty of job. We need those guys. Nobody will fire a single worker at the defense industry in Poland, Germany, France, Portugal, name it, because we have those needs. But we will never have them if we don't order supply at the European level.
What does Business Europe think of the Draghi report? And the Draghi report, I think, is about many things, but it's about competitiveness challenges, which I know you care about, but it's also saying, look, if our capital markets were any good, were more liberalized, we'd be able to pay more for defense more easily, we'd pay more for sustainability efforts, et cetera, that we're undermined. We have more of a zero-sum game in spending because we don't have capital markets that are liberal enough that are generating this. Is that a manifesto that your organization embraces, or do you think it is largely not going to be the map of economic liberalization strategy?
It's the map. Let's not look for something better. We have this one, we have Draghi and Letta, let's follow this one. The issue is that I feel after like a year and a half ago, Europe was kind of all waked up. Ukraine, the crises, now even Hormuz, so very much ready. 10, 12 omnibuses in the pipeline, so those deregulation movements in the pipeline. Since then, only one has been, or two of them, of the 12 has been voted, which is very little. So we have this tendency of old lady Europe to normalize crises. Oh, I'm not dying. Fair enough. I will go at the current pace. So that's why you need people like Business Europe, so business community, waking up permanently the old lady, because we love her, and we have no other choice by her. So we are here to push those processes. And Draghi and Letta, it's exactly what we need.
You know, President Trump is out there saying, hey, big transnational company in Europe, come to the United States or I'm going to put a sanction on you or a tariff on you. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has said he can't do that, so bluntly, but that's what we were doing. We also had passed during the Biden administration the Inflation Reduction Act, which had very little to do with reducing inflation, but it had a lot to do with subsidizing companies and creating a big home market and driving technology. And so a lot of firms are taking advantage of the IRA and continue to do that. And my European friends are saying, wow, America's become a mercantilist country. Do you feel that we are a bad partner at this moment and drawing away your big businesses and investment? Do we need to redo that in some way? What are your views?
I think that the business communities from across Atlantic, I've been at the Business Europe General Assembly yesterday, and we have had representatives from the US. The business communities are aligned. So I would say it's much tougher for Americans than it is for Europeans today. When I hear Americans about, yeah, we have some ideas, but we cannot voice them in front of our president. For me, being raised under the communist regime reminds me something. This sudden silence on the transatlantic side, but we have arguments on both sides.
Right.
Because in Europe we have complexes about AI, big techs, whatever. But today you have still in Europe industries which are globally controlling the economy. You have plenty of SMEs, €1 billion turnover German SMEs, being unique providers of laser components for chips production, for F-35 production, for Ford automotive production. So we have arms on our side as well, but the idea is not to escalate. It's to find the most popular expression, to find a deal with America. So we hope that the current 15% taxes will remain. But our biggest enemy is not US, it's not China, it's ourselves. When you look on the barriers, internal barriers of the single market, the equivalent of 40, 50% of taxes between countries, just because of the tariffs, just because the single market is not finished.
You know, Maciej, one of the things I find really interesting in Europe, which many Americans don't realize, is the level of entrepreneurship that exists in Europe, the level of digital entrepreneurs creating very new and different companies. I mean, there's just a kind of narcissism in America that I think is unhealthy. But I moderate every year at the Web Summit in Lisbon, where there are more than 100,000 people that converge on Lisbon for the Web Summit. And a vast majority of them are European. Of course, there are Americans and folks from Africa, folks from the Middle East, but a staggering number of European digerati, often younger generation people that are out there. And I'm just interested in how AI is playing in Europe now, how it's playing in your member companies, because for us, it's now an obsession to figure out what is going to be displaced by AI, what's going to be, how's productivity going to be enhanced by AI, what are we going to have to begin figuring out? It's not all about governance and regulations, it's what are the opportunities of that? Is that same conversation happening here robustly?
Yeah, but I'll just give one example, and then I get back to the AI. Yeah. So yes, America has big techs and has AIs and has plenty of this, and you have lasers and space wars, whatever. But in Poland, in my pocket here, I have my e-citizen e-wallet where I have my medical prescription,
Which is way better than we have.
My tickets, my road ticket, police tickets. I have my insurances, whatever, all, and even the information about real estate.
Which is a huge achievement.
And please go to see a tax office in the U.S. You will have a kind of bulletproof wall with a lady and the microphone, and will speak 19th century with the printed, if not handwritten
exactly
documents.
Right. Yeah.
AI for me. I think we should not have complexes about AI because we are not able today in Europe to build European ChatGPT just because of the personal data protection regulations. But remember, in the 90s, we built the controlling of the European economy, and we progressed with European business based on what? On Microsoft Excel. And we pushed the Microsoft Excel way beyond the borders which was created for.
Yeah.
So here we can say, do the same thing, take the ChatGPT, personalize it for the European purposes, and build advantages on this basic tool from America. So let's don't make a taboo question.
No, I think it's a really cool, I mean, it's a cool frame. It's one of my favorite comments, because you're exactly right about the lady in the tax office. You've been out there, but I do sort of see it as a coming challenge, and also the just enormous entrepreneurship in Europe. What's the first thing you're going to do when you go from president-elect to president?
Well, first is go to Brussels. We have a meeting with President von der Leyen, and to go to push the agenda. It's really the agenda we have it, the roadmap we have it. Draghi and Letta, I'm mixing them. Draghi and Letta, and let's make it just quicker, because there's a Danish presidency report which says the 12 omnibuses will take out of the European businesses the burdens which are equivalent to the half of the new burdens which are already in the pipeline. So we just have to go quicker and farther than we thought. But there's no choice. If you do not succeed in the coming 3-4 years to provide European citizens with some hope on the economical perspective, because economy means taxes, and taxes means welfare and European model of living. If we do not provide this hope, the nationalism will win across Europe. We have good news from Poland 2 years ago, good news from Hungary today, but we have all those bad perspectives in other countries. So we have to provide signs of success in the 3-4 years to come to stop it and to reverse the trend. And we have no other choice than work together at the European level. Otherwise, we are non-relevant to other countries. And I will finish one thing about Europe. For me, the ultimate argument for every people which think that Europe is not a value, it's that apparently President Trump doesn't like Europe, and he only doesn't like the elements which he's fearing. So if there is a kind of tension with Europe, it means that there is a value. It means there's strength before Europe, and we have no other options than to sustain it and develop it.
Well, one of the things I would say in terms of my long relationship with GLOBSEC is I'm always thrilled that this place is not only about guns, it's also about butter. And it's about the economy, the businesses, the things that have gone here, innovation, what is the ecosystem, and what are the global opportunities for partnership in that area. So I really want to applaud you, because you've been a big part of that in GLOBSEC for years. So Maciej Witucki, who is President-elect of Business Europe and a long-term member of GLOBSEC, board member of GLOBSEC, thank you so much for joining us on this show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Again, I would just say, as we conclude, this was I think, a fun morning. Oh, Willie, you are here. I was going to bring you. You want to come join me on stage for a minute? Yeah, we're going to do this. In case you don't know this, Willie Molterer, of course, is. Yeah. We're going to do this for 5-10 minutes, because this is the kind of show I wanted to have dancing and music and do a little Stephen Colbert kind of act and whatever, have this go on. Yeah, or be Johnny Carson. You know, for you young people, you don't remember Johnny Carson, but his sidekick was Ed McMahon. So next time I need a sidekick down, I was using Mike Rogers for that for a little bit. But it was a great thing. I saw you down there, and I wanted to come in and give you an opportunity to ask a question or make a point. We've had this wide-ranging set of participants this morning. Mike Rogers. We had former head of NSA. We had. Marcus Takna. We had the former foreign minister of Egypt. We've had other people. But what I've always been interested in your role as chairman of GLOBSEC is the vision of what GLOBSEC needs to be to fill a void that might be left if it weren't here, in terms of what our goals and objectives should be, particularly with younger generation people that are here listening. I want to give you an opportunity to share that.
Well, my very fundamental take is keep Europe united, make Europe attractive, and make Europe relevant. Because sometimes our tendency is to explain the European story out of the past. Okay, it's a result of World War II, blah, 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 blah. If I'm talking to my grandkids about that, it seems to talk about ancient history. But what's in for them in the future? I think this is so key for everybody, at first. Second, I give you an example or two. I had just a meeting with the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ghana. And I asked him, why the hell are you here? And he said, for us it is a fascinating opportunity, without any bureaucracy, without any protocol, to have open and frank discussion with people we don't know and people they don't know us. That's the best description of GLOBSEC's role I've ever heard before. Give you a third example.
And he was on this stage earlier this morning.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. There was a Minister for Foreign Affairs of Uruguay. And I said, what the hell are you doing here? And then he said, interesting, we are interested to talk about the impact of Mercosur, not from the perspective of Paris or Madrid or Brussels. We want to have this region engaged. And I think exactly this is what we wanna do. We wanna have, on the one hand, the vision how to make Europe relevant, keep relevant, make it stronger, how to have clear positions on things like the war against Ukraine, but also open new opportunities for all of us.
How do you feel the tilt is going on Ukraine, just to wrap this up? I just love how you just described GLOBSEC as this fertile, rich ecosystem of all these unexpected things that happen that might make the world better, because we don't see enough of that, and that's really great. I've been worried about some of the headliner issues a little bit, that we become a little complacent, a little lazy, too much inertia in the Ukraine story from the US side. I'm just interested in how you see the tilt going, and what do we need to do to wake up again to the importance of what's going on there?
Well, first of all, over the last couple of months, I hope everybody, or years, everybody has realized that this is a war against us and not against Ukraine just, first. Second, like it or not, the current administration in the US has given us, on the one hand, or was giving us a mirror, what have we missed over the last years or decades? On the other hand, it's crystal clear, it's on our shoulder now. And we had this morning a very good discussion with ministers of foreign affairs of many European countries. And this is a fundamental responsibility of the European Union, in any case, not to be neutral. Not just to, let's say, facilitate. No, position ourselves crystal clear. We stay on the side, and we need the Ukrainians on, as member of the European Union. There is no doubt about that. And I think these are elements where we have to position ourselves absolutely crystal clear, and GLOBSEC is instrumental to do that. And two, I would say force people to go into this direction if they are not totally clear.
Well, that's great. Well, just as we wrap up this interesting morning show, I just want to thank Willy Molterer and all of you for what we are all collectively achieving in GLOBSEC. Thank you very much. Chairman of the Board of GLOBSEC, really appreciate you. We are adjourned. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you. Okay.